If working class people are raised in obedience culture, why do they struggle so much with the unwritten rule of compliance in white collar work environments? This is a question that I have struggled with over the past nearly decade of my research on the unwritten rules of work for the working class. I'll tell you my reasoning for it based on my research, but let me know what you think. So a lot of working class people are raised in authoritarian parenting, which is a lot of obedience culture of that you know who the hierarchy is, you do what they say, you are not equals with your parents. They give you direct commands. There are clear consequences to violating them. There are defined boundaries. Your parents are pretending to be your friend. The unwritten rule of compliance is not disagreeing, is being voiceless, and is even if they're asking you something that you know that you're really just supposed to agree. So if they say, hey, you're an expert on this, what do you think? That you just say, yes, boss, I think yours is great, as opposed to actually giving your ideas. So you should think people with obedience backgrounds, they should like that, right? They're used to taking orders. But over and over again in my studies, I found that people from working class backgrounds hate this unwritten rule, and so do neurodivergents. So that is for a much more clear reason. Neurodivergents, we think hierarchies are stupid, and we don't pick up on hidden cues about who's in charge and why. But from a class component, what I think the difference is that compliance feels like you're being told not to obey. Somebody asked you for your opinion, and you gave it. But the unwritten rule was you weren't supposed to give an honest answer. You were supposed to schmooze. That's another unwritten rule. There's also differences in communication style, as the commenter pointed out, but aren't working class people very direct? Yes. And compliance is very indirect because someone using compliance wants to be able to say, well, I consulted with the expert and they agreed with me. While working class people grew up with parents who didn't care if they agreed with them. I mean, obviously there are exceptions, but in general, a lot of working class parents, for safety reasons and for raising them for working class jobs, tell them you do it because I told you to, because I'm your parent. So compliance would be like if your mom told you, go to the store and pick up a gallon of milk, but you were supposed to read the unwritten code that she doesn't really want a gallon of milk. That you were instead supposed to say, but mom, no, we have water at home. If you do that in a working class home, you're going to get your hide tanned. So it's a conflict with the direct communication, but it's also a twist on what obedience is. And I'm not campaigning for either one. I'm just talking about the culture clash here. There's also, when you experience social class mobility, you're also seeing whose opinions are valued. And you're noticing that a lot of them are valued by people who know how to play the office politics, the unwritten rules, and not necessarily by people who are task experts. And so you start to doubt the competence of the authority that is speaking to you. People who grow up valuing hard work, as a lot of working class communities do, because that's where they get a lot of their dignity, because their jobs are already seen as lower in status, even if they make decent money. It triggers a rage when the authority does not seem to value hard work and instead knows how to play games. I made this chart here that it's not really showing it well on my TikTok screen, but I think a key difference between obedience, a culture, and compliance, which each have their own issues. I want to be clear about that. Authoritarianism is a problem. One is pretending to be your friend, while the other is acknowledging they are an authority. And I think that is part of the culture clash. So that's my take. What's y'all's?